Hi, welcome to Mother Murderer Podcaster, the podcast where we celebrate the most outrageous and the best made for TV movies of the 80s and 90s.
Hi, I'm Katie Madonna Lee, a filmmaker.
And I'm Lewis Jordan, a writer. And in this episode, we are covering the 1989 NBC made for TV movie Roe versus Wade, starring Holly Hunter, Amy Madigan, and Kathy Bates. And this is honestly one of the best directed and best written and best acted TV movies that I've seen. It's really good. But the real star of this film is Holly Hunter as Ellen Russell, aka Norma McCorvey, aka Jane Roe, who is the plaintiff in the landmark Supreme Court case that legalized abortion in America until, 2022 when it was overturned. Um, and it's interesting timing because uh, the day that we're recording this, the previous day, a Texas judge, ruled in this suit filed by an anti-abortion group that this abortion pill that's used in like half of abortions nationwide shouldn't have been approved by the FDA like 20 years ago, and they want to suspend its FDA approval and make those pills unavailable. And so once again, Texas is trying it. Texas is trying the exact same thing. So, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Um, and this is a polarizing subject, and you might agree or you might not agree with this movie or with our opinions, but in this episode we're going to talk about abortion. We're going to talk about our opinions on it, on Roe versus Wade, on the recent overturn and the pro-choice and the pro-life movements. And so you know uh if you agree with us or get something from that, that's great. And if you don't, then, go listen to something else or like go wash the dishes. Um, but with that said, one of the things that struck me about this movie is how enjoyable it is and how much it focuses on the human drama in the case. And it's not just like an issue movie where every character is like a mouthpiece that just speaks in sound bites and ideas. Um, and Holly Hunter won an Emmy, and Amy Madigan won a Golden Globe. And also, this TV movie introduced me to the real life Jane Roe, Norma McCorvey, and her completely goddamn wild life story, um, which we'll get to later in the episode, is documented in this documentary called AKA Jane Roe. But to start out, I'm going to give a plot summary for the movie. Okay, so Roe versus Wade. It's 1970 in Abilene, Texas, and Ellen Russell is working as a carnival barker, trying to get people to come see the freak show. So after work, she calls her mother, who's taking care of Ellen's baby. Her mother has custody of the child, so Ellen never sees her. And Ellen reveals why she's calling. She's pregnant again, and her mother won't help, and the man is nowhere to be found. So Ellen quits her job and she hitchhikes to her father's house. And he lets her stay with him, and Ellen goes to the doctor to try to get an abortion. And she claims that she was raped, but the doctor says that he still can't give her an abortion because it's illegal in Texas under any circumstances unless the mother's life is in danger. So Ellen finds out about an illegal abortion clinic, but when she goes there, it's abandoned, it's been shut down, and it looks really horrible. Um, so Ellen sees a lawyer about giving up the baby, and he recommends that she get in touch with these two young lawyers, Sarah Weddington and Jane Coffey, who are looking for a pregnant woman who wants an abortion in Texas, who's willing to sue the DA of Dallas to try to make abortion legal. And from Sarah Weddington's perspective, Ellen is perfect plaintiff for the case because she's poor, she's uneducated, she's white, and she's already unable to care for her current child. So Ellen meets Jane and Sarah, and she likes them. She decides to be their client, and they kind of intimate that, if they're able to make abortion legal, then she could get an abortion. So she's really hanging on to that hope. So Sarah and Jane go to court and they win the case, but the court doesn't issue an injunction to enforce their decision. So even though abortion is legal, Texas will keep prosecuting any doctor who does it. And so Sarah and Jane appeal the case, but by the time that it gets to the Supreme Court, it's going to be too late for Ellen to get an abortion. And you kind of get the sense that the lawyers kind of knew that the process was going to take a long time and that it might not happen in time for Ellen to get an abortion, but they didn't say anything. So Ellen is forced to have the baby, and she has to give it up without even knowing if it's a boy or a girl in this really horrific scene. And she's traumatized, and she attempts suicide after she gets out of the hospital, but her father rescues her and she recovers. And she moves in with a female friend, air quotes, and starts looking for a job, but she's suffering from postpartum depression and she's racked with guilt about the whole thing. She's really messed up. And at the same time, Sarah is gearing up for the Supreme Court case. And Sarah and Jane argue their case in front of the Supreme Court, and they win, and abortion is illegal. And in the meantime, Ellen seems to be in a healthier place. And her friend sees in the paper that abortion has just become legal. And she says, "Oh, look at this," and reads the story to Ellen. And then, after hiding it for the whole movie from everybody, Ellen admits to her friend that she's Jane Roe, that it's her case, and she's afraid of how her friend's going to react. And her friend says that she's so proud of her. And then Ellen is kind of proud of herself too, like she's finally done something important with her life. That's the movie. It was nominated for 6 Emmys and 3 Golden Globes. It won the Emmy for Outstanding Drama Comedy Special, and Holly Hunter won the Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Miniseries or Special, and Amy Madigan won the Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actress in a Miniseries or a TV Movie. And the movie was a hit. It was the 10th most viewed primetime TV show of the week. So, and it caused a big stir when it first came out. You remember?
Yeah, I do. So I was a kid, and this was before I hit, like, puberty or anything. So I remember this the night before it premiered. I think it premiered on a Sunday night, or I know that school, like Catholic school, was the next day. Everyone was told to pray and do the rosary the night before it was supposed to premiere, because to not persuade people to have an abortion, the social contagion of abortion, that this movie was almost demonic because it was praising and giving attention to abortion. And the whole idea, I remember I asked, because I was like, what? Like I said, I knew what abortion was before I knew what sex was growing up, because of the Catholic culture, and my grandfather's he was a president of Right to Life of Indiana, and my babysitter went to St. Joe, and she was very Catholic at the time. And then her
Mm-hmm.
friend got pregnant, and that changed a lot, because her friend, like, the pregnancy, she had her kid when she was 15, but it altered her, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so it was insane. It was a big controversial thing in South Bend. my mom and my parents, of course, were off in their own land, so they were like, "What? I don't care." It's like they did, this is not something I watched with my mom. I didn't watch it. I just remember that a lot of Catholic people watched it, which I thought was weird, but I think it was to be outraged because I think that's they were what the internet is about every issue before the internet, meaning Catholics are obsessed with abortion, like obsessed with it. And it was always a thing since I was put in Catholic school, the obsession with pro life and abortion. So when it came out, I look back and I think it's weird because the movie is very nuanced, unlike the pro life movement. The pro life movement and the Catholics are very un moved by pleas of every, the health of the mother, incest, rape. They're unmoved, they don't care,
Yeah.
and they think in absolutes when it comes to abortion.
Yeah, because
So
to
this
them,
movie
it's
is
a
very
it's a
nuanced,
moral
and
issue. Yeah.
it's a moral issue, meaning it's a woman's issue, and the woman shouldn't be a whore.
Yeah,
Like, I
yeah,
mean,
no.
that's what it comes down to. I can just tell you that. And so yeah, it was a big deal when this came out, and actually they made their own, pro-life movement made their own Roe versus Wade. So if you try to look for this film online, you'll see Roe versus Wade 2022, and it's very much their polarized, like, what a whore this woman was. She slept around. Very, their point of view is very present. It's not a nuanced story. Like in this film, which I really loved about it, it reminded me of when I went to Notre Dame and I had the professors there are the men are very, I mean, extremely pro-life, and they're just going to
Yeah.
shut we weren't even allowed to have a conversation about abortion in class. They're like, do not talk about it in class. And because it would get ugly. Growing up in South Bend, men are constantly, especially when I presented very feminine, I had big boobs and a big ass before I was ready to understand the implications of that. And I wasn't ashamed because I didn't know you're supposed to be ashamed of your body in that way. And men would just bring it up, like, to me inappropriately, ask you if you have kids, have you had an abortion? And then they tell you their opinion, like the comment section. They're just like gonna
Mm.
stick. It's like, I feel like their comment section, when men insert themselves into their opinions and their arguments, it's like they're sticking their dicks in your face. Like, no, no, you're gonna look at it. You're gonna say it. I'm I'm gonna stick my opinion in your face, and that's it. Like, no matter
Yeah.
what, I'm gonna tell you what I think, and I'm gonna talk to you like you're stupid. And I wrote down some of the notes of the Amy Madigan character, and that one of her confrontations she had with the another pro-life leaning lawyer. Leaning is a way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where he says to her, you're not going to win this case because you're so emotional. And I thought that was interesting to me because, he's the one who's getting emotional about it. And it is a very emotional issue for these men, which is crazy to me because they oppose all help and aid to the mother and shame mothers and make or and support policies that are anti-family and anti-children left and right. Yet they are obsessed with the life of the child, but they could care less about the quality of life. They don't care about anything beyond that because they're ignorant of the brutality of raising a child. They have no idea how awful it is. They just think women have these kids and they smile. They have no idea the postpartum psychosis women go through, that they can't pee normal for the rest of their life. Is true. Like, you can't do jumping jacks after you have like 2 kids, like without peeing your pants. So it ruins your bladder. There's a lot of things that it does to women. Your body changes forever. And yet in media, it's always, look at me, I had all these kids, look at my perfect body. It's very much anti-mother, our society. So
Yeah,
they want
yeah.
it both
I
ways. So the main audience for this when it came out was Catholics, and it was in the paper like Roe versus Wade. This abortion propaganda will
yeah.
be airing on our televisions. It should be censored, that
Well,
type of hysteria.
uh, no,
I re-
it makes sense that it came out at that time, because I think right around then there had been a challenge to Roe versus Wade, and then there was a big march on Washington, where all of these feminists were, and everyone was giving speeches, and it was really in the culture, because during that Reagan era there was a big pro-life movement, a big anti-abortion movement that really grew up, that was much bigger than it was in the 70s. And
well, I can tell
so
you why. Can I tell you why? So
yes,
this is the
sure.
history of the pro-life movement. It was always a Catholic issue. It was
Yes.
never a Protestant issue. It was never a evangelical issue. It never was until televangelism came along, because the Protestant, like the Protestant communities thought Catholics were, they didn't want, Catholics and evangelicals historically do not like each other. And Catholics, it's not like Catholics think of evangelicals at all. Evangelicals like hate Catholics. They're more, I hate Catholics. The Pope is Satan. You're evil. They don't like Catholics. Okay. So abortion was the peace wall for these two religions. And the only reason it was is because the evangelicals used to stand on racism to bond, to bring their group together. It was, we're going to segregate our schools. We're going to use Jim Crow laws to keep our religious group bonded by this common enemy, no, that's not us, type of thing, to keep our group bonded. Well, that wasn't working anymore to get their congregations emotional and revved up, to empty their pockets, to unify them. They couldn't do like interracial marriage, like no, because Christians, working class Christians, and a lot of people were intermarrying and having interracial kids. So that wasn't a thing. So they couldn't do busing. They could not find an emotional topic to bond them until they found abortion. And when they found abortion, all they had to do was be like, these women are killing babies. And it brought together this insane, robust, emotional gust that unified them, and still is the wind beneath the evangelical church's wings. I have met evangelicals that are more pro-life than Catholics. Evangelicals are very passionate, very, very much so. And the great unifier of this church has been abortion. And in the 80s, as someone who went to Calvary Temple, as someone who was involved in early 80s 80s evangelical religion, without knowing, I was being like, my parents had no idea like what was happening during the early 80s. It was a satanic panic. It was, they would tell us, don't listen to Ozzy Osbourne, don't listen to Kiss, don't trust people who wear all black. These people are the devil. They are. So that was coming. That was still a thing, but that lost momentum. But that pro-life thing kept going, and the several reasons for this are that within the pro-choice community, it seems to serve career corporate women in the long run more than it serves your regular working class woman. Because most working class women, or working poor women in the service industry that I know, don't want to have abortions. They don't want to. especially the friends who've had abortions and confided in me. They said they'd never do it again. It was the worst thing they ever experienced. It was horrible. And a lot of my friends who had abortions would quickly end up go out and get pregnant again to deal with the fact that they had an abortion and their guilt and their grief and things like that. So I meet a lot. I see that a lot of my friends who had abortions who were not these kind of corporate, like, I want to have a career, this is not the right time, actually wanted, they had all the I can't afford it. They had many of the, thoughts Ellen has, such as, how am I going to, have this baby when I can't find a job? If the dad would just pay child support, I could keep the baby. um Doctors cost, everything is against them having this baby, so they have an abortion. And yet in the pro-choice community, in the feminist community, women, working class women, are shunned. We are, period, hands down. I can say this is why I don't like feminism. I'm not a feminist, modern feminist. I'm like a rescue feminist, meaning like our priority should be women, children, rescuing women from bad relationships and educating women. That's it. I don't think we need to be. I always see feminists talk and they're always like, well, if we want to be the CEO and have men stay at home, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you think like this is you wanting to do you. Okay, this is not every woman in America doesn't want to be the CEO of a company. It support our modern day feminism 100% supports the very thing they can't stand, which is capitalism. So it's so contradictory and so confusing that they don't even know what they're talking about.
Yeah,
And
and
yet they've
this
alienated so many women. When you alienate a group of people so viciously that have experienced this emotional trauma, like, they had an abortion and it was very hard for them, and they had no, such as even having the baby and giving it away is so traumatic for women, and they have had no support from, feminists. They've been shamed. I've had conversations with, middle class white feminists. They are very mean and almost like, well, you shouldn't be so emotional about it, like, you should be almost sociopathic about this disconnect. It's just a fetus. And I'm like, it's complicated. Okay. We know that it's complicated. So I'm going to say no. And this approach to women who've had abortions and telling them just to move on and like, I'll get on with it. And, go chase a career or something. Like, the career is like surrendering to a company your whole life is going to rid yourself of these whole, your trauma in some way. Like, it's gonna fix it, has alienated all these women. And so their trauma, the only people who will listen to them is the pro-lifers. The pro-lifers, when this is what is crazy and amazing at the same time about pro-lifers, is that they are dedicated to what they're doing in a way that pro-choice people have completely messed up their whole. They've messed up. Like, they have messed up their message, their marketing, their community. It's a lot of infighting. It's a lot of you're not cool enough to be here, versus the pro-life movement will take anybody at all. They will take anybody, and they will listen to your critiques and change the way they behave, such as Hannah's House, organizations like this in St. Joseph County. These are houses for unwed mothers that are, that can't afford to have their kid. So they live in a house. Like, there's a house mother. They live in a house. They have their baby. They're taught how to be, how to eat, nutrition, how to raise their baby by a community of women, and they're counseled. And they're counseled on how to get a job. They're counseled on all these things so that they don't have to get an abortion. And the answer to that was what they were finding, especially, these Catholic abortion warrior men were going out there and seeing the reason why. They would talk to women at abortion clinics that were heading into get an abortion and say, well, do you really want to do this? Do you really want to do this? And they'd say, I don't. I just can't afford to have my kid. And they're like, okay, well, put you up. We will put you up and your baby for like the first 3 years of your life. It's what I'm saying is like those houses have sprung up because the pro-life movement they listen to the people that are struggling with this, whereas the pro-choice movement does not
Yeah, well,
towards
and this I think that
abortion.
this whole story definitely shows that. I mean, in the movie, it shows the disconnect between sort of middle class, college educated feminism and then the
Ugh.
plight of a working class woman. And I think that
I'd
it
say
really
working
shows that
poor because she's
working
working
poor.
poor.
Yeah, no, she's I mean
Working poor.
she's literally homeless when
Yeah.
they're, when I mean, but uh she yes, and they show that with a lot of nuance, and they're not entirely letting um these lawyers off the hook for the ways that they used Ellen, who is, actually Norma McCorvey. And then, as you were saying, what we'll get into later, Norma had during the 90s a
Mhm.
very dramatic turnaround and converted to became a born again Christian and became went from being one of the big faces of the pro-choice movement to being one of the big faces of the pro-life movement. And I think that it was because the the pro-choice movement, for various reasons, felt like she was a loose cannon and wanted to she made them uncomfortable and they wanted to distance themselves from her, whereas the pro-life movement were like, we love you, come here.
Yep.
Now they were also 100% like going for her and trying to get her as a trophy. It wasn't like it was purely out of good intentions, but they were, it speaks to what you were saying. So I think that this movie and the story of Roe versus Wade around it kind of illustrates all of those points.
Right on.
Yes. um but I wanted to move back
Sure.
into the
Let's go.
movie.
Okay.
And I think with this movie, the first thing I wanted to talk about was Holly Hunter, because I feel like this is a good movie, but she's the best thing about this movie.
Yes.
Um, and she's a great actress. I mean, like the piano, her performance in the piano is like one of the great performances. And there's like Broadcast News and Raising Arizona, and then there's The Adventures of the Alleged Texas Cheerleader Murdering Mom, which is another one of the great TV movies ever made and one of the great TV movie performances. So she's really kind of a TV movie queen in a way. Um, she's got this kind of like grounded, sort of likable, like girl next door quality, but then there's also she seems very intelligent and there's this kind of like restless intensity. Her characters are often like at odds with the world or with themselves, and but we still like them. And she has that accent, she keeps that that Texas accent that really like makes her sort of more grounded and relatable. But yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about her performance, because as we discovered, she's not necessarily exactly playing Norma McCorvey. Her character isn't even named Norma. She's named Ellen. But um her performance as the character that was written, I think, is extraordinary. Um, what was your impression?
Oh, she made her character extremely empathetic and relatable, and the almost impassioned pleas, and she's definitely likable. Like I felt more interested in her than in the lawyers. The lawyers were very cold and sort of standoffish, clinical. It reminded me of Aaron Brockovich in a way where I felt like Holly Hunter was more like the Aaron Brockovich
Yeah.
And those lawyers were the ones that were like, we have law degrees and we went to Harvard, so you have no business, you know, doing all thinking you're a lawyer, Aaron Brockovich. That was kind of that rift there. Um, but I think especially when you really when you see the real Norma McCorvey in the documentary, it even makes Holly Hunter's performance shoot up even more because Norma McCorvey is definitely as more complicated than I think even the abortion issue has become. She is the most complex, complicated, I'd say marketable,
Yeah.
unlikable
Yeah.
character. Very fascinating. Very fascinating. It to me, it's like when you're at the liquor store in a really bad neighborhood and someone's like asking you for money and they tell you this crazy story.
Yeah.
That's Norma McCorvey in real
She's
life.
very much
Holly
that
Hunter,
energy.
yeah, Holly Hunter did meet Norma McCorvey.
Yeah.
They did meet. She consulted on the movie. So they did meet. And whatever Holly Hunter did, you know, she got the kind of truth of the situation and did it accolades.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
speaks to that technique. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, and I think that one of the things that really impressed me was she definitely played her as kind of a con, a little bit of a grifter. You know, I mean, when we first see her, she's a carnival barker, and she lies very easily to try to, you know, but just to try to get through life and to try to, you know, just survive. She's lying all the time, um, and then you'll see when she's talking to people, um she'll start to get angry, and then she'll uh she'll realize that she'll either try to play off something that's difficult, as she's sort of laughing and trying to act like it's no big deal, like she does in the pool hall monologue. Or there's a scene where the lawyers tell her that she's not going to be able to get the abortion, and she loses her temper for a minute, and then she collects herself and kind of laughs a little bit and is like, what am I doing, and puts on a better face. And you can uh you can see the things that are going on inside of Ellen, and then the way that Ellen is choosing to present herself at that moment. She's always Holly's always playing on multiple levels,
Yeah.
and I think that that really, you know, you can see her thinking, you can see her considering, and trying to play these situations, but then you can also see her in private moments where it's just her and her emotions. And so I think that 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 aspect of it especially, is so good. And I think, you know, if this had been released theatrically, she could honestly have gotten another Oscar nomination out of this. It's that
Definitely.
kind of role that an actress would kill to get. And were there any favorite moments of hers that you can name?
Well, I just love the lines when she um would say things, how do you know what I'm going through, when she was standing, up to the lawyers. I love that when she was saying, how is it that you won and I lost? I love
Yeah,
that line when she was like, she knows, she's like, you made me believe I could get an abortion. You made
yeah,
me believe that. I love when she stood up to them in their that she was like not letting them passively, because they sat there the way I've had these confrontations with, you know middle class feminists who think because I'm more animated and loud that I'm, beneath them, or just manless, or whatever they can grift, because women do this where they're like, how can we peck her down? Let's find a weak spot where we can peck her down and not and kind of demean her so that we can look down on her to get what we want. And that is how women kind of deal with each other, is they peck each other down. And in that moment I saw them being like very like, well, we told you this might happen. We, very like, doing that gaslighting, the gaslighting that, there so many people do. They're doing it to her, and she's like, no, I know this. I know this game. I love that scene. That's my favorite scene, is when she's interacting with those two women. And
They do have
um
a sort of complex relationship throughout the movie, though, because they keep, and I think in a way that maybe didn't happen in real life, but uh they keep in touch over the phone, and they sort of develop this kind of relationship a little bit. But and I think that the lawyers are, you can see Sarah feeling bad about uh, about Ellen's situation, and feeling sort of guilty about the way that she's using her.
mhm.
And I think that maybe, I don't know how much of that actually happened, and I think that that was just trying to make it, but I appreciated that they did, even though they sort of softened it, that they did show, uh there are moments where, like, when they're first meeting, Alan says, so you can get me an abortion, and they say to her, well, why don't you, or let's just do this, or the guy that she's meeting with, who recommends them, she says to him, can they get me an abortion? And he says, why don't you just meet with them? And then she says to them, so you can get me an abortion. And then they sort of go around it, and they always sort of
Mhm.
go around it and let her think what she wants to think, even though they sort of know. And I think that they don't, it's only later that Sarah begins to get a sense that this is, a real person, who's really counting on them, and not just, their ideal plaintiff.
Well, this is what I was thinking the whole time, is if they really wanted to help her, they could come up with, like, they could have got her bus fare, plane fare, train fare, took her to Illinois or New York to get the abortion.
Yeah.
They could have paid for her to do that because it was legal in New York. That's even what the guy, she first meets with says to her. And she's like, how am I going to get there? With what money? On my good looks. So I was thinking the whole time, like, why don't they just, kind of, they're using her, but they could scrounge. I get money's tight, but you can scrounge up something, like have another garage sale, do something like to maybe help her get her abortion.
Yeah, yeah, that was a huge oversight, and I think it shows how much they were not really trying to help her, but sort of using her to further their cause. Why don't I
Movements.
I'll do a little background on
Okay, go ahead.
Norma, since I watched the documentary. So yeah, Norma was a lot worse than Ellen. Like, Ellen is just, as a character, is sort of irresponsible. She's adventurous. She's a little chaotic, a little messy. But she really wants to be with her daughter, but she doesn't have the money to raise her. You know, we see a lot of, she's very sympathetic, and we see a lot of vulnerability. Now Norma, um, she had a harder life, and she was a much bigger mess. First of all, Norma McCorvey was a lesbian, and they barely hint at this in the movie, just barely, by having Kathy Bates be her kind of like butch best friend. Um, but then having them talk about like her man problems. So when I saw this documentary on the FX documentary, aka Jane Roe, and according to that, Um, it all sort of started, you know, when Norma was 10 or 11. Norma didn't get along with her mother, and so she and a friend ran away from home, and they robbed a gas station, and then rented a hotel room with that money. And then the maid walked in on them kissing and called the police on them. And so then Norma was sent to reform school. And then when she got out, she lived with a male relative who sexually abused her. They didn't mention any of that. And then when she was 16, she got married to a 22-year-old man. They did talk about this, who she met while she was waitressing. And then after she got pregnant, he said, "Oh, well, this isn't, it's not, can't be my child." And so she left him. And Norma's mother disapproved of her being openly a lesbian, but also, you know, being like a drunk. And so she had custody of Norma's first child taken away from her and raised the child herself. So then when Norma was got hooked up with Sarah Waddington and Linda Coffey in the Roe versus Wade case, she wasn't just struggling; she was also addicted to drugs and alcohol. Then, after she had her second child and gave it up, the Roe baby, then she met her longtime partner Connie in 1970, who's, you know, I guess the Kathy Bates character. And they met when Norma stole food from the store that Connie ran, and then Connie let her work off the debt, and then they were a couple for 25 years. Um, and then what's interesting is, so it was like 10 years after Roe v. Wade, then the pro-life movement started really heavily protesting abortion. And so Norma heard about it, and she started going to pro-choice meetings and protests, and she started giving speeches for the movement, and they were into it. But then she admitted in a TV interview that she actually had not been raped when she claimed that she had been raped. She just said that to try to get an abortion. And then a bunch of people were like, "Oh, now Roe versus Wade is invalid because she lied," even though the decision had nothing to do with her being raped. But that really kind of burned the pro-choice leaders, and they were like, "Okay, she's a loose cannon. We can't put her in front of, because she's gonna mess things up." So then when there was that 1989 Washington March, they had like Jane Fonda and Whoopi Goldberg speaking, but they didn't invite Norma. And Norma got pissed. And so she hooked up with Gloria Allred, the famous lawyer, and she did a ton of high profile interviews, just did a media blitz, and sort of made herself a face of the pro choice movement. And then in the 90s, she was working counseling women at an abortion clinic. She had really gotten deep in, you know, into that. But at the same time, it was like she wasn't, you know, she wasn't like a crown jewel of the movement. She wasn't, you know, like an organizer, or she was, you know, working at a clinic as a counselor, you know. I can't imagine she was making a ton of money doing that. And then the pro-life movement decided to just like target her. And this pastor, Flip Benham, who was a big pro-life figure, they moved into the building next door to the clinic where she worked, and just started like seeing her every day and working on her. And eventually in 1996 she converted to evangelical Christianity. And then she became the face of the pro-life movement, and she had repented and saw the error of her ways. And when she converted, she was told that she had to give up homosexuality, and so she kept living with Connie for a while, but they stopped having sex, and eventually she left her, and said publicly, "Oh, I used to be a lesbian. I'm no longer a lesbian." And then near the end of Norma's life, in 2017, she was interviewed for this documentary, and she said, "No, all of that was bullshit. I'm still pro-choice, and the pro-life movement used me, and I used them back. and they paid me about a $500,000 in financial gifts. And so I just said what they told me to say. Basically, they made me a better offer than the pro-choice movement did. And then she admitted all of this on camera at the documentary, and then died soon after in 2017. And it's just like there's so many, because at no point during that admission does she ever act regretful that she was going against her principles. But then it makes you think that this is probably much more complicated than she's letting on. Um, and so I think that there were, multiple levels to it. That, on one level she was like, okay, these people, the best for a while, the best sort of shot that she had was the pro-choice movement, but they really weren't taking to her. And so then when the pro-life movement was there, and they were like, we love you, we want, I think that there was an emotional level and also a financial level. I don't know how calculating she is or not, but holy shit, it's such a wild story. And it's so interesting to see both the pro-choice leaders and the pro-life leaders watching her admitting this, that she was doing it for the money, and both of them are just like gobsmacked and hurt, for
I
different
kind of like
reasons.
that. I kind of
Yeah.
like it though. I'm
Yeah.
like, cause you're both calculating and discarding
Mm-hmm.
people that are actually having to deal with this real life thing. And as somebody who is I've been a woman my whole life, like I said,
Yeah.
and I've been marching in, anti-abortion rallies, not by choice. Like kids don't have choices. I
Yeah.
was
Yeah. You're
my
just
my
told this is
babysitter
what
had
you
me do
do.
that. Yeah, my babysitter had me march. Now she's totally intensely pro-choice, which was a shock to me because I was like, oh my god, when I was like, I'm not going to bring up abortion because I don't want to hear the speech. It's a life. That gross thing when men suddenly found Jesus. It's like their I found Jesus moment. Like, but it's a life. And I'm like, a life that you are either going to sexually assault, rape, neglect, put in the permanent war economy. You're not going to provide for. You don't care what happens to this child. You don't care about the environment it grows up in. All the, anyway.
Well, there was an interesting thing I noticed in the movie, the way that the men were in the movie.
Oh,
Now, Ellen's father is, he's maybe the only like good character who he abandoned Ellen when she was younger, but he cares about her now, and he's asking her, what do you want? What do you need? But the rest of the men, there are these lines like the DA who's arguing against Sarah Weddington. Um, he says, "Well, it's the end of a life," and she says, "Well, women are dying. That's the end of a life." And then another time he says, "How can any intelligent person feel sorrier for the woman than for the baby?" And then there's another point when even her Sarah's lawyer husband literally says to her, I don't care about the client. Um, it's the case that counts. There's nothing that you can do for her. And it's this thing with men on both sides that they care about the issue, but they don't care about the women. And that keeps coming up in a way that feels very intentional, that they're showing like these men. And then even there's the guy who says that he's going to help Sarah, who's from the fancy law firm, and he's like, oh, you can't write the brief, and then he's like, I'm having trouble with it, I just don't have time. And
mm-hmm.
then uh or then there's another part where Sarah's husband throws this tantrum about how she's always busy and doesn't have time for him. And it's like, could you imagine the wife of a lawyer throwing a tantrum because he's on an important case and he's always busy, and how that would come off, and how they would be perceived? And so I just think, like, this movie is definitely nuanced, but I think that it goes out of its way to show that men on both sides are often, they're discounting the actual women involved.
100%. And thank you for saying that, because I'm going to bring up another anecdotal story as a woman
Okay.
in a
Yes.
very Dolly Parton body. I'm going to say this. The men I have encountered on, like, I've already told you about my experiences with pro-life men, okay? But here's my experience with pro-choice men. Pro-choice men, the ones who are mouthpieces and blowhards, the ones who post on like social media, the ones, because there was a lot of social, oh my god, I had one acquaintance from Boston who I'm like, have you even had sex? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to, but you are like such a nerd. Anyway, he was like, if any of you women need to have an abortion, you can stay at my apartment in Boston, Massachusetts. And I'm like, yeah, because that we just have to have abortions every day. Like, yeah, your friend group, like the posturing of it was just so odd. Like, you could stay on my couch. You could, no, I don't want to stay. I don't want to stay at your couch. That's weird. What?
Yeah.
Like, or because it was such a virtue signal. Like, I care about women. Stay on my couch. And then on the other hand was one time I was dating a somebody, and there was a scare because I went and had the intercourse, people, and I can tell you it ain't worth the juice. The juice ain't worth the squeeze. I'll tell you that. That's how I feel about intercourse with men. It isn't. I'm sorry. It just isn't.
Yeah, no.
It just never. It's not worth like the STD scare, the UTI cost, or the baby. It's just not worth it. Like, if you want to have a baby, then just get your juice, get the seed. But like, if you're trying to have an orgasm, just get yourself a vibrator. It's just not worth it. Anyway, we had a scare, and I was like, I'm not gonna have an abortion. Like, it's not gonna happen. Like, this is not. Like, because so many things, like, I am not going to interrupt my body. It's just not going to happen. Like, it's already there. I'm going to push it out, and it's just how it's going to be. Like,
yeah. Well, you can.
Life.
I
know
you're
that.
allowed to.
I know
make
to
that
some people that
decision.
sounds. It's my choice, and he was like, "But I'm not ready, and you have to be on your own." And I'm like, you just think. Because he was shocked because I lived in New York City and I was doing career woman things. How could I go off brand? Because he just assumed because I was in New York City and I was in the arts, I would just have an abortion and just, do that because it's very in brand and step with what what he thinks it is. And I was like, no, I'm going to do what I want. It's my body. It's my choice. And it's also it's half of me. Unfortunately, it's half of you. Ew. Cause now I don't like you, but like, I know I've been with women. I've picked up women. I've sat with women after they've had my friends who've had abortions, and it's not something I want to go through. Like, I've seen how sad they get, and I just don't want to deal with that. That's just me. That's me. Now, that's me.
Yeah. And you're not
but
telling anybody else what they're supposed to do. You're just, that's fine.
That's me. And like, he was just so upset about it. And then 2 months later, he was like, "Oh, I want to have a little version of me." And I was like, "I don't."
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not. I am not. I do not want to have a little version of you ever. I don't even want you around me. Goodbye. Because I am not convenient. My body is not about being convenient to you and what you want. My child is not about being convenient to what you and serving your agenda. No, that's not how this works. And that is something that I see a lot with liberal men. Like, another guy I dated, he was like, well, I had my girlfriend get an abortion because it wasn't the right time. I'm like, how much was that her choice? And how much was that you pressuring her? you know? And that's what I don't like about abortion is that it's like men tailor it to their needs. Period. Period. Now,
Yeah.
if I support you as a woman, your choice, and every choice a woman makes should be fucking supported. Whether they have the kid and raise the child, they should be supported. They should be. It takes a village. They should not be punished for having a baby. And they are. They're punished for having a baby. They're punished for having abortion. They're punished for having sex. And it's not fair. It's not fair because I see all ends of the spectrum as a woman. Like I see women who professional women, college educated women who are child free going on about I'm child free, I'm child free. I'm like, great. Don't brand don't brand something so personal and something so nuanced. Like I don't have kids, I have cats, but I'm not going to mark myself child free. That is gross to me. I'm not saying, I'm just kind of like saying I'm not abandoning other women. I'm not going to sit there and say, well, you had a baby and that's your problem now. I'm going to be like, oh, you had a baby. I want to, like, how can I help you? That's hard. Like, it's
Yeah.
the hardest thing to do. And I think you need support. Oh, you are pregnant and you have to have an abortion. Well, you want to get an abortion? How can I support you? Like, just be there for you. That is my position. And yeah, like with all religious and spiritual aspects of life, you can't get in other people's business. And that's I don't like the government telling people. I've met doctors who are Catholic who don't like the government telling them what they cannot give and give, get involved with their patients. It's just not right. It's weird. It really, the doctor and the woman need to figure this out,
Yeah.
versus the
Versus everybody
government.
else getting it. Yes, exactly. And I think that that's, that's an important thing to keep in mind, that we're really talking about uh women here and supporting women, supporting their choices, but nobody should be feeling shunned. And I think that um the class issues in feminism and in the pro-choice movement are made really apparent in this. One
Preach, baby.
Yeah, one thing that I wondered, now, since you talked earlier about, how this movie came across, in 1989 and how it was received, and so how do you feel that it comes across today? Like after basically last year, Roe v. Wade was overturned. Watching it from a modern perspective, do you feel like it still resonates? Do you feel like there's things in there where you're like, or what was your experience of watching it in, now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned?
Well, I think one thing that is interesting to me is this movie for me was a lot like a horror movie to me when I was younger, because it was given the same um dimension of a horror film like the Satanic Panic when I was little. Now, I kind of reflect back on my brain chemistry and how when I was little I was so afraid of Kiss. I was really afraid of the band Kiss because
Mm,
of the Satanic Panic. Yeah, one of my uncles would have a Kiss shirt on all the time and I would run screaming. And I remember my brain chemistry at that time, when Roe versus Wade came out, the same fear of, oh no, is this good or bad? Is this good? Like the confusion, because my babysitter had to do the rosary the day before it was supposed to air and the day it was aired, and they had a mass, like they had Catholic mass for the protection to, end abortion. It's always pray to end abortion type thing. Huge rally against the movie, yet they all watched it. So to me, it reminded me of the Satanic Panic. So I almost
yeah.
was afraid of it the way I've told you how I was afraid of Kiss for a really long time. Like
Yeah.
it took
Yeah.
me a long time to listen to Kiss. not because I just was I had that background voice of they're they're monsters.
Yeah, this
And
is something that's evil. It was built
so
into you at a young age.
it
And
was, and the first time I heard Kiss and knew it was Beth, What Can I Do? And I was in the car with my mom and I freaked out. I was like, she's like, "Oh, this is Kiss." I was like, "What? This is Kiss?" And
this is
I
what I
was
was
so
supposed to be
upset.
afraid of.
I cried. I was like so horrified. She's like, "What is wrong with you?" I was like, "Did you know that like at Calvary Temple?" She was like, "Oh, Calvary Temple." I was like, "But I loved it." You know, I did. I loved preschool. I loved going there. It was great. But you can love going to something and also have it indoctrinate you into things that you shouldn't be terrified of. So when I rented this, I found this movie. I bought it. This is my babysitter got rid of all her VHS tapes, which makes me so mad because she had such good VHS tapes. Um, and I remember being like, okay, it was like the same apprehension. Like, am I going to be invoking a demonic spirit when I put this in the VCR?
Mm-hmm.
When I watched this. So for me, it was a moment of like this the whole time. I watched it like this, and then I rewatched it when I was more relaxed, the way I listen to Kiss now, where I'm like, oh, I love this. This is a good song, you know, like.
Yeah.
So once I got past the fear of the movie, the like mysterious, like, is this good or bad? Like, what is it? Is this because I remember seeing the beginning when I was 9. I saw the scene where she goes into the abortion, the back alley abortion clinic. I saw that
Oh,
when I was
yeah,
9.
yeah. Yeah,
That's the
that's
only scene
scary.
I saw and I remember, and they showed it to me. Like my babysitter showed that scene to me. So I don't know why. I think it was to be like, don't have sex, don't get pregnant, because then this is what's going to happen to you. Because like, you know, they did all those. If you have sex, you're going to die, like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
If you smoke weed, you're going to die. Like it was very much that throughout like the 80s and 90s,
Yeah.
early aughts type thing. Uh, so
But this the second time that
um,
when you rewatched it.
when I rewatched it, I thought, wow, this is so progressive and well made. This is an excellent movie. This is like this should be a theatrical release. This reminds me of almost a Boys Don't Cry film, you know, which was Hilary Swank's big moment, and also a
That
big
sense of
moment for a lot of
atmosphere,
filmmakers. Hmm?
that sense of atmosphere and place
Yes.
is so
Yes.
strong. It really feels authentic. Uh, that's very cool that you were able to go back to this thing that you had strong childhood emotional associations with, and then be able to see it very clearly, and then not only take away that mystery and fear from it and that power that it had over you, but also to be able to get something from this movie, you know, as a film, and also from just like the message of the film, to be able to get something from it. You know, it's that's wonderful that that was able to happen.
Yeah, I thank you. I'm glad that I confronted my prejudices and fears for both this film and Kiss.
Yes, yes.
I was able to
Well,
overcome.
Kiss is, you know, they're so goofy. There's such a bunch of like goofy, silly, you know, you were gonna rock and roll all night and party every day. Um, you know, and then you uploaded this to YouTube, which
Yes.
now I think that that's kind of the only way, like your upload of that is the only way that you can really kind of see it, because it's not streaming anywhere.
It's not streaming anywhere, and it's very rare, a rare film to find, and I wanted it up there because it is an excellent film and needs to be seen, especially for a TV film. But the other issue is that there was the movie by the same name called Roe v. Wade, that came out, that is very has a particular agenda to it. Came out in 2022, and doesn't have like the tight filmmaking that this our film we're discussing has. And I felt it needs to be in the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Because if this other film from 2022 is being seen, then this film from 1989 needs to be seen so they can balance out their points of view if they're willing to. Because honestly, I wish people would seek out a balanced, like, how will this actually play out in reality versus how do I feel about this?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
will this
No.
play out in practical reality versus how I feel about this? Will this make me feel better? Like,
Like we were saying with the film, not using people for an end, but be seeing what people need, what
yeah,
what actually needs to happen. Um,
yeah.
so now every episode we find a monologue from the movie that we're covering, and we call it our Mary Catherine Gallagher monologue. Um,
Superstar.
Superstar, yes, named after the SNL character played by Molly Shannon, who is hosting Saturday Night Live tonight, and we're so excited for it. When this is being recorded, not when
Yeah.
it's coming out, but it'll have already happened. But we're really excited for the return of Mary Catherine Gallagher. But her character is this Catholic schoolgirl who is obsessed with TV movies and constantly quoting them and doing hyper dramatic monologues from them. So this one, there's no campy monologues in this movie. But this was my favorite one. So how do you want to do this? Do you
I'll
uh
be Connie.
you'll be Connie? Okay. So the scene is that Ellen is playing pool with Connie and another female friend, and they're all drinking beer. Ellen's pregnant, and she's just trying to forget about it for a while and have some fun. And then they're talking about men problems. Okay. Let's see if I can do this. All right. God, men could be so sweet and so nasty. The same ones. Now, why is that?
Ellen, you don't have good luck with men, honey.
Tell me about it. When Roy and I got married, I didn't let on that I was pregnant. When he found out, he beat me clear from the kitchen to the living room and halfway back again. He said it wasn't his. It couldn't have been nobody else's. I said, this is your baby, and I ain't done a thing I'm ashamed of. As soon as he went to work the next day, I sold his clothes and stuff, and I split on the son of a bitch.
That's Cheryl's dad you're talking about?
I think about him sometimes. And you know what I'd like? I'd like to do something, and he'd hear about me, and he'd feel bad about how he behaved. I'd be somebody, and he'd still be pumping gas.
I could say that about everybody I ever knew in high school.
I can't even find the guy. If he'd have just paid his child support, I could have kept her, but I had to work. I tried sneaking her to the job. I never could afford a sitter. Put her playpen in the washroom. Oh, I got fired regular. Well, thank the Lord for mother. She took Cheryl from me, but she's raising her fine. So what can I do? I signed the damn papers, listened to my mother, fall asleep at night hearing my mother.
You can't think about it all the time.
She would have liked the carnival. She would have liked the ponies. We got a couple of real sweet ponies there. And scene. How is my Holly Hunter accent?
Very good. Very good. I didn't even attempt a Southern accent because it would have been too campy. It would have been like, you can't think about it all the time. Like, unlistenable. unlistenable. I don't know if so. One thing I will say is if you go watch the film on our YouTube channel, there are plenty of comments, good and bad. Some are ridiculous. Some are like, I like that accent. And one is like, horse shit.
Oh yeah, no, here, let me.
Abortion is still murder.
Yeah, this one, another dramatic reading. I want to read one or two of these. Um,
Okay.
this one is all caps, horse shit. No matter how they spin this story, whatever the justifications, abortion, us just killing of a person for convenience. It's murder. Still, try being the fetus who is burned or ripped apart in the womb and then argue the benefits of abortion. Um,
Speaking of that, I'm going to talk about the actual baby that this film was about. So the
oh, yeah,
baby
yeah, yeah.
was the Roe baby was born and she was given up for adoption, and she has come out for saying that abortion should be legal. It should be a choice with the woman because she says a child always knows, even when they're being carried, but that they're not wanted. And when you watch her speak, you can see the sadness in her. Like you can see the sadness in her, deep sadness in this person, even though she was adopted. And this speaks truth to a lot of the social workers I speak with who have said that when a mother is depressed or beaten while she's pregnant, it affects the fetus. It affects it. It definitely affects how their emotions. And this is what it goes back to. Our society is so disconnected from nature and from just healthy environments in general that so many pregnant women are forced to work during their pregnancy, when it should be like, how do we like support this person? How do we support their mood, you know, their health, versus making them work and just spit the baby out like it's a machine, because
Yeah.
it's not. And it's fascinating to me that another, standing on, their virtue signaling and their, oh, I love these babies, but screw the mother, screw them when they're born. That
Yeah.
constant contradictory.
There's another comment that I thought, to sort of to close us out, that I really liked, from Wheezy Norman a month ago. And they said, she said, I gave up my first son. I was in the same predicament she's in. I got a guy to knock me up and brought me 1,200 miles away from my family. I called my mama and wanted to come home. She wasn't having it, nor would she help me with it. A mother wants what's best for her child, whether it be with her or a stranger, and people shouldn't judge what they do, but I was judged. And, so there's people who are really relating to this movie, who were, in the same predicament. And so I thought, on the opposite end of the horse shit, I like that there's people who are watching it and really relating to it on a personal level. Well, thank you everybody for listening. And you know rate us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and watch us on YouTube. And Katie uploaded the Roe versus Wade on our channel, so you can watch it in its entirety there. And also follow us on Instagram or TikTok at Mother Murderer Podcaster, for clips of the movies that we cover. And if you like the podcast, you can support us by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TV Movie Pod C. Oh, and another thing that I forgot to say, tonight and tomorrow, I'm going to this live recording of this scripted podcast that was written and directed by John Cameron Mitchell, called Cancellation Island, and it's starring Holly Hunter. And so I'm gonna go see Holly Hunter perform on stage tonight, and I'm so excited, because she's just incredible. And I love that I was able to get real steeped in Holly Hunter before getting to go see her. So that that's a cool little addendum. But anyway, thank you so much, and we'll see you all next time.
Au
Bye.
revoir.